All right. I'd like, again, to officially welcome you to today's webinar, Helping Your Members Thrive. My name is Jessica Birch, and I'm with the Corporation for National and Community Service in the Office of AmeriCorps Vista, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. I'll also be facilitating the live Q&A at the end of the session. Also joining us are Rachel Raddick and Jenny Farrell from our partners at Education Northwest, who have helped to prepare today's webinar and will be managing the WebEx technology. You'll also see them in the chat and Q&A panels to help address questions that you may have during the session. And now I'd like to welcome our main speakers for today. I'd first like to introduce Shannon. Shannon Stover has been working as a National Service staff member and trainer for more than a decade. After graduating from college, she served as both a VISTA and a VISTA leader, after which she joined the staff of the Montana Governor's Office of Community Service as the statewide training officer. Since that time, she's overseen thousands of AmeriCorps members and staff with positions with the Montana Campus Compact and Montana Conservation Corps. Shannon currently works as an independent consultant, providing training to AmeriCorps members and supervisors with each Montana National Service program, as well as VISTAs across the nation. I'd also like to welcome Colleen Homer. Colleen is a program officer for the Corporation for National and Community Services New Jersey State Office. She previously served as an AmeriCorps Vista member and Vista leader and managed a 41-member AmeriCorps Vista project in Buffalo, New York. And finally, I would like to welcome Eric Powell. Eric Powell is a person who enjoys service, giving back to people and the community, and is always being happy. He served as a Vista member in 2006 with Rhode Island Campus Compact at Roger Williams University. He then served as a VISTA leader in 2008 with Illinois Campus Compact at its main office located at DePaul University. He now works with the Corporation for National and Community Service as an AmeriCorps Vista training coordinator, organizing pre-service orientations and supervisor orientations across the country. Throughout today's presentation, we will be sharing specific tools and resources to help support your work as a VISTA supervisor. We know it's not easy to be a VISTA supervisor, so we want to support you as much as we can. These strategies and activities have been compiled into a one-page document called Helping Members Thrive Supervisor Resources. This list tools and resources was included as a link in the webinar reminder email that you received. Don't worry, we will also post this document directly to the Vista campus along with the webinar recording. And Jenny also just posted this right in the chat for you all if you want to download that now. So, a fun way to get started, get everyone to know, you know where we're all at. Shannon's in Montana, Eric and I are here in DC, and Colleen is in the Garden State of New Jersey, but we want to know where you are at, where you're serving, where you're working as a VISTA supervisor. So, using the annotation tools on the upper left side of your screen, click on the one that looks like an arrow on the far left and use it to point exactly where you are working as a VISTA supervisor. A quick note, if you are connected to this webinar using a smartphone or tablet, the annotation feature may not be available to you. But if you can't use that, you can always type into the chat as to where you are at. So, a lot of people on the East Coast. Man, we got a lot of Texas, too. Ian there is up in NorCal, Northern California. Katie, I want to say Durango. You are down there in the great state of Colorado. We have Chantal. She is in Alaska. I served as an Alaska AmeriCorps Vista, so way to go, Chantal. It looks like everyone, there's many in Texas, a lot in the New England states. It looks like we have a few in the Pacific Northwest, joining our partners up there with Education Northwest. A few in the southern states. So as you can see, you guys, work in your different roles as VISTA supervisors. VISTA may be a big part of what you do. VISTA may be a little bit of what you do, but you share something very special with everyone on this webinar. It's that you're helping your members work to alleviate poverty in our country, and we immensely thank you for what you're doing. As I mentioned, we know it's not easy. We know that it can be very tough, but we do thank you so much for what you're doing, and we always want to help you as much as possible. So it's great to see where you all are serving, or I'm serving as VISTA supervisors. So thank you all. So now what we're going to do is I'm going to move this on over to Shannon, our main speaker here. Shannon's going to take it away and start us off today. Shannon, back to you.
So much. So hello and greetings from Montana. As Jessica said, my name is Shannon Stover, and I'm truly excited to be with all of you today. Thanks so much for taking the time to further your understanding of VISTA supervision and to learn more about ways you can help these amazing folks thrive. I've worked with National Service Programs and AmeriCorps members for almost 15 years, and it continues to be an inspiring endeavor. I'm extremely passionate about these programs because I believe that National Service is a movement, and a really important one at that. VISTA not only provides nonprofits and community organizations with a tremendous resource to assist them in delivering their mission, it also creates opportunities for people from all walks of life to become stewards of their communities and engaged citizens. Working towards this higher purpose requires more from a supervisor than your traditional employee-employer relationship, and the importance of your role really cannot be overstated. These programs simply do not work without all of you. You are the key to the success of this entire movement. It's a big deal, and it's been said, but we'll say it once more, we all appreciate your work. My hope is that during our time together today, I can share some of the strategies I've gained along the way, and that these strategies might help you support your member and move them into what I like to call their thriving lane. Remember, when VISTAs thrive, your project thrives, and fulfilling our commitment to national service requires both. So, as you know, VISTAs serve under unique conditions, and their commitment presents a challenging transition that requires many sacrifices. I believe that the best way to discuss thriving is to identify the emotional and developmental barriers associated with this transition. So with that, during today's session, we're going to discuss common challenges in the VISTA member experience, develop an understanding of when and why common challenges occur, provide information on how to proactively give support to VISTA members during their term of service, and identify strategies and best practices for helping VISTA members maintain high levels of motivation and engagement. So that is a lot to cover in a small amount of time, so let's go ahead and get to it. Okay, so let's begin by taking a minute to unpack the word thrive. The word thrive is thrown around often in our work, but what does it mean to thrive? What does a thriving member look like exactly? Go ahead and use the chat feature to share some of your thoughts. How do you define and describe a thriving member? What might that phrase mean to you?
All right, so what does a thriving member look like? No pressure here, no right answer, no wrong answer. I know it's hard to get the juices flowing, so we have some already coming in. Great. So Minerva said engaged in work is what a thriving member looks like. Carly says taking initiative. That's always a great thing. Julie, this is so important, excited about what they're doing. That's always something you don't want them to lose that passion as they go through service. Tracy here said challenged, but still in control and meeting their goals. It's definitely important not to be bored, but definitely want them to still feel like there is a way to accomplish a task, even if it's challenging. I like Lucretia. She's got 3 Ds here: dedication, determined, and dependable. Those are very great qualities to have in a thriving member. Let's see. I like Terry. Terry says, someone who owns their VISTAhood. I feel like that has so many meanings, and all of them are positive, so that is wonderful. I think I'm going to have to use that, Terry, in the future and at PSOs. Ray here says, a member that is active in the community and developing relationships both professionally and personally. I think that really touches on a good work-life balance. We want them to do work. We want them to be gung-ho and do, and get stuff done, but we want to make sure that, that they have a personal time, that they can take that time to rejuvenate and be the best VISTA they can. Also, Gregory said, we'll end here with Gregory. He says, engaged with the community and happy with their work. That's always great. We want them to be happy with what they put out and what they're doing, and that what they're doing makes them feel like they're really making a difference in their community. So Shannon, I'm going to turn it back over to you.
Awesome. Great responses, everybody. And I think it's important sometimes to begin with the end in mind. So thanks to those of you who took a moment to define what thriving looks like from your vantage point. Okay, so moving right along. We're going to frame our conversation today using the cycle of service. The term cycle of service describes the emotional and motivational swings you'll see throughout a member's term of service. It turns out the term is actually grounded in two specific evidence-based models of human development. The first is Ken Blanchard's situational leadership model, which is commonly used to discuss coaching and performance. The second is Bruce Tuckman's stages of group development model, which is most often cited as a tool to manage group dynamics. We're going to get into the specifics of those in a moment, but before we do, I want to emphasize the value of relying on models to inform our supervision practices. First, when we introduce common behaviors within a model, it allows us to think about those behaviors along a continuum as a process of development versus just isolated events. Second, when we anchor our understanding of behavior within a process of development, it gives us an ability to not only deal with what we're experiencing in the moment, but also an ability to predict behavior as well as reflect upon behavior in a more neutral way. I teach this subject to hundreds of members each year, and I can't tell you how often I receive email from folks months down the road talking about how helpful this information was to them as they navigated their year. I honestly believe it's some of the strongest content available in regards to understanding motivation and perseverance in service, and to me, that's what thriving is all about. I mentioned that the cycle of service draws upon both situational leadership and the stages of group development. Each of these models present ways to exercise leadership through varying levels of direction and support in order to achieve performance and create strong teams. This concept was also discussed in a VISTA webinar about retention called VISTA Member Retention 201, Responding to Member Challenges. During that webinar, this model was used to help supervisors learn coaching techniques to help overcome difficult situations that may occur when working with some VESTA members. For today, we're going to focus on the developmental factors that are used in each model to help explain the member's mental and emotional state, which is the key to enabling them to thrive. The first developmental factor is about commitment. And when we talk about commitment, we're talking about how connected the member feels to their tasks and their team, to the goals of the project, and the mission of the organization. We're really talking about buy-in. The second developmental factor is competency, and this has nothing to do with intelligence or capability. Competence refers to how well the member not only understands their tasks and roles, but how well they understand your organizational culture, their new community, and their new stage in life. Competency isn't just how familiar they are with their VAD or whether or not they know how to use the copy machine. It also refers to how well they understand their emerging adult responsibilities, things like living on their own, managing a budget, building new social connections, etc. These two developmental factors help determine an individual's developmental level. We're going to go through each level in depth, but I want to introduce you to the overall framework and terminology before we do that. All right. Here we have a nice visual that allows us to see a linear developmental progression marked by 4 distinct developmental levels. As you'll see, generally speaking, when human beings enter into new experiences and new settings, they do so as enthusiastic beginners, marked by high levels of commitment and low levels of competency. As time goes by, the newness wears off, and they transition into disillusioned learners, marked by low levels of commitment and low levels of competency. Now, as long as people stick with it, whatever it is, they'll eventually learn and grow into their new role and become what's known as a reluctant contributor, marked by a high level of competency but a low level of commitment. The final developmental level is a peak performer, which really describes thriving, representing high levels of both commitment and competency. Transforming from a reluctant contributor to a peak performer requires increasing commitment and creating ownership over the work. Again, this is a researched, proven model of development that is fairly predictable in both its sequence and timeline. However, nothing is true all of the time, and it's important to note that this process is not always linear, and certain events, like receiving a new supervisor or a significant change to the project, may alter the timeline and sequence. That said, based on my experience, I feel you can generally count on your members' development unfolding in this fashion and should feel comfortable relying on the model to proactively anticipate your members' needs and give them what they need in order to thrive. All right, so let's jump in and talk about these developmental levels individually. To begin, I'd like to ask you to think about the last time you made a big, exciting change in your life. Things like getting a new job, moving to a new home or town, entering into a new relationship, etc. When you reflect on that experience, I want you to think about how you felt at the very beginning, the first day of your job, the first night in your house, the first time you walked around your neighborhood. What did you feel? What were the feelings that came up during that time? Go ahead and type that into the chat box, and let's see what we come up with.
Thank you so much, Shannon. So those feelings, got a lot of them already coming in. Nervous, scared, Eric here says of course, now it just went away from me. Anticipation. So you're anticipated, maybe a little bit nervous, maybe a bit excited. I love Lisa's, oh, good Lord, what have I done? That's fair. There's some anxiety themes here, other feelings. There's doubt. There's that second thoughts on that chart we just showed. There's those second thoughts. And then, Ray, I like yours. All over the spectrum here. There's relief, there's anxiety, and there's excitement. So your relief, like I'm finally here. Anxiety, wait, I'm finally here. Excitement, yes, I'm finally here. So it could span the spectrum. Lynette, overwhelmed. Vanessa here said questionable. There's a lot of excited. There's some timidity. There's anticipation, as we said before. Jason here says a lack of control. Vincent says a little bit of nausea. That's perfectly normal. And Janelle, I like Janelle's determination to commit to the new beginning. So they understand they have all these things on all these feelings, but they're determined to commit to it. So Gloria, we're going to end here with Gloria. She says, I recently moved to a new home after being in my previous home for 20 years. I felt excited, yet unsure of how well I would adjust. And that's true for anybody, whether this is their first job, their second job, their first time out of college, the first time away from home. All those new beginnings have those different feelings. So yeah, Shannon, back to you.
Awesome. Thanks again to everybody for your great participation. And these are pretty common and expected responses. When we think back on our experiences of trying new things, Gloria, sounds like you didn't have to think back too far. So let's go ahead and use the model to break it down and better understand what was going on. So the first developmental level, known as the enthusiastic beginner, is where your members will be for the first few weeks of their term. While that might feel like a short period of time and not worth focusing on, it's actually one of the most important phases of your members' experience and will set the tone for the rest of the year. When your new member arrives, they'll have a high level of commitment and a low level of competency. That commitment is a reflection of the excitement and enthusiasm we all experience at the beginning of something new. This is a result of the positive expectations we build as we prepare for a new venture. The stories in our head about how amazing our new experience will be, things like that. For your new member, they're probably envisioning themselves as an incredible vista and thinking about how in awe you're going to be of their skills and abilities. I mean, let's be honest, young adults are always known for their humility. Additionally, some of these folks are moving away from home for the first time to a new town, a new life, absent of their usual safety net. In their mind, it's going to be like an awesome sitcom or a TV show where they have a fantastic home, fabulous friends, and delicious food. They're literally living in their expectations. They have yet to experience disappointment, and their commitment is high because they're completely bought into their story. But the thing is, they may have no clue what they're doing, and that's not to say they're not capable, smart individuals. That means that everything is new, and they don't have the information or experience they need to make sense of it all just yet. They're a little suspect of you and your organization, and they're trying to figure out what this whole Vista thing is. While they're excited to be away and on their own, they're also aware of the fact that they've made a big life decision and taken a risk. So in light of these two forces at play, it makes sense that your member would be experiencing a lot of conflicting emotions, and that's when we start to act a little witchy. We begin to rely upon old coping behaviors and wear masks that we think will help us navigate the transition and cause others to develop a high opinion of us. Some people wear a know-it-all mask or a too-cool mask. Other people become pleasers and try to have the right answer to every question. Some people rely on humor and overuse jokes, and others turn into wallflowers and say nothing, because if you say nothing, you won't say the wrong thing. The point being, the person that your member shows up as on day one may not be an accurate reflection of who they really are, so cut them some slack and reserve judgment. All right, so let's get to some tips. What do you do to help your enthusiastic beginner thrive? First, begin by recognizing that these members don't know what they don't know. What this means is that it's your responsibility to anticipate your members' transitional needs and do your best to prepare resources to help them thrive. A good example of how to put this approach into action is to draft a community entry plan. Include things like who the best landlords or property managers are, when you can find the best deals on groceries and events and traditions your community has that your member might enjoy. Think about cheap things your member can do to have fun and ways that they can meet new people. Write this information down and send it to your member prior to their start date. When they arrive, pull it out, take them on a tour, show them around, and treat them to a meal. They'll soak it up and get a much faster jump on starting their new lives than if you leave it to them on their own to figure out. Next, you have an incredible opportunity to leverage that high level of commitment into positive tone setting. The best way to do this is to draft a formal orientation plan and stick to it. This will help your member understand the structure of your organization and the roles and responsibilities of everybody that they will be interacting with. Be as detailed as possible and make no assumptions. Things that are intuitive and obvious to you may not be to them, so be sure to cover everything they need to understand about working in your office. It's also a good idea to include others from your organization when drafting the plan to ensure that everyone's on the same page and that your member is receiving a cohesive message. Remember, the orientation isn't just about training your member to function in your office. It's also about establishing trust and confidence in your abilities as a supervisor. Finally, use this opportunity to establish strong communication patterns with your member. During the enthusiastic beginner stage, I would recommend conducting brief check-ins twice a day, once at the start of the day and once at the end. This is your opportunity to monitor their transition and help if needed. Ask questions to get to know them and develop a sense of their relationships and support structure. Knowing more about the person they are will allow you to support them more fully moving forward. While we're talking about check-ins, I want to mention it's important to keep your check-ins up throughout the member's term. If you check in with your member consistently, meaning minimum of once a week, and predictably, meaning that these are scheduled ahead of time and the commitment's kept, you set the stage for a thriving term. All right, so before we jump into our first guest speaker, I want to direct your attention to the supervisor's resource handout that's been provided to you. The team that pulled together today's webinar did a great job identifying specific tools to help you put all of these practices into play. For example, you'll see that we provided links for you to use to assist you in developing community entry and orientation plans, as well as resources for you to use when coaching your new member through their transition. I strongly encourage you to use this document moving forward because, as we all know, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. All right, now I'd like to invite our first guest speaker, Colleen Homer, to share her experience as an enthusiastic beginner.
Thank you, Shannon. So I started my national service career in Buffalo, New York as an AmeriCorps Vista member, serving with the International Institute of Buffalo's Victim Services Unit. There, I was tasked with creating a financial literacy program specific to immigrant and refugee survivors of human trafficking and/or domestic violence. I relocated to Buffalo from New Jersey to serve and was excited to begin this new chapter in my life. One of my first impressions as a VISTA member was a note on the office wall calendar that said, "Colleen's first day!" This was an incredibly small thing for my supervisor to do, but it really made me feel welcome and that the staff was just as excited as I was. That tiny gesture has stuck with me to this day. As a VISTA member starting my first professional job, I can relate to those feelings of nervousness and excitement. I also wanted to do my best. When I started as a member, I wasn't the know-it-all or the wallflower, and I truly saw myself as someone who wasn't afraid to ask for help. What I didn't know was when to ask for help. I underestimated my ability to communicate with my supervisor on progress and lack thereof. My supervisor's desk was not even 5 feet from mine, but she did not schedule regular check-ins, nor did I ask for them. Because I didn't know when to ask for help or when to check in with my supervisor, this led to a few tense conversations as well as some misunderstandings. I remember very clearly one of those conversations in particular. My supervisor had asked me to contact local organizations that served immigrant and refugee populations in a nearby county and offered to train the staff around issues of domestic violence, how to identify it, supporting the clients, etc. As an enthusiastic beginner, I began to research and call organizations that very day, but was not able to lock down any dates to officially set up a training. More or less, I kept getting the "we're interested, but not right now" answer from staff members. After leaving my contact information and making a plan to follow up with those contacts in 3 weeks, I felt that I had done a sufficient job in completing the task. My failure was in not communicating any of this information with my supervisor. In the next week or two later, my supervisor asked me why I had not worked on this project and that she had reassigned it to one of my colleagues who was able to set up a training for the next month. Feeling defensive, I stated the progress I had made and that I was planning on following up. I remember my supervisor telling me that I had an issue with communication and I needed to update her on my progress with every project every day. My feelings as an enthusiastic beginner began to fade, and I felt defeated. I hadn't realized that communication had to happen on a regular basis and that both a supervisor and a supervisee were responsible for checking in with each other. This defeat led me to slip into the disillusioned learner stage shortly after this incident. So my tips for supervising the enthusiastic beginner are, first and foremost, making sure that the member feels as welcomed as possible. Make a banner or sign, or simply tell the member that you're excited for them to be here. Second, make sure the member feels welcome within the organization. Introduce each staff member to the VISTA and ask the staff to share a brief overview of their duties within the organization. Also, ask the VISTA to share their project goals with each staff member. That way, other staff members will know the VISTA is more than an intern or an assistant. Lastly, but most importantly, I will echo what Shannon shared. Meet with your VISTA regularly to avoid miscommunications and unnecessary setbacks.
All right. So thank you so much, Colleen. I appreciate you sharing your experience. And now let's hear from those of you out there across the nation. What other ideas do you have to help an enthusiastic beginner? What have you done that's worked well in the past, or what new ideas do you have after hearing our suggestions? Go ahead and type your responses into the chat box. Let's see what we can come up with.
Thank you, Shannon, and thank you, Colleen. Colleen, you have some big fans here in the chat. Stephen here said, that's our Colleen Homer, Jersey Pride. So way to go, Colleen. So what are some ways that you've helped your enthusiastic beginner? This can be, it almost seems a little counterintuitive because you're like, they're enthusiastic. Like, I don't need to help them. They're good to go. But what are some ways that you've done that? Maybe spent, during those first couple of weeks, maybe you spent more time meeting with them than you would as it went throughout their service to really get them engaged in the work that was going on. Let's see here. We have some coming in. Tracy said, in our organization, we always stress our open door policy and how important it is. Our VISTAs really love being able to pop in when they want. That's really great. Definitely always have those scheduled meetings, but also knowing that, you know, kind of like, I'm never too busy for you. Like, it really is helpful in making sure that that they feel welcome and that they can ask questions and that questions are welcome. Gloria here said that we send them a welcome package prior to their start with company goodies, including a t-shirt. Great way to get them oriented to your site, get them, you know, all geared up to start service. Olivia here said team building activities and on orientation to site checklist. It's really great to have them go through that, make sure they know the ins and outs of the organization and maybe even some things in your community. Caroline here says, I have gotten Mara connected with other of our staff, one of whom has served as a VISTA herself before working for the Y. So that's great. VISTAs helping VISTAs. And that's exactly what this webinar is all about, former VISTAs helping VISTAs. Let's see here. Janelle, first day, personal handwritten welcome note and a welcome package of supplies. That's always the sweetest thing. Like Colleen mentioned, how nice that was to get. Ray here says that she took her VISTA on a tour of our main street and introduced her to the business owners, as well as asked her to attend meetings with me to make sure she met the people that she needs to, or as many people as possible in our organization. I also bought her lunch the first couple of days while we were out and about. That's sweet. Another idea is like a potluck, like a first day potluck, everyone come in. Remember, VISTAs don't make a lot, so if you're willing to make a lot of food and give them a bunch of leftovers, they're going to love you. Always, you know, we see a lot of themes here, good orientation to start with, plug into young professional groups, other VISTA and AmeriCorps members serving in the area, yes, 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 regular meetings, and reassuring that you're VISTA that you're there to support them. That's really one of the best things that you can do is just always make sure that you're there to support them and that they know that you're there. So, Shannon, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much. And again, thanks for your interaction with us. Some really, really good information in there. All right. So the second developmental phase is known as the disillusioned learner stage, and it's a doozy. When we talked about the enthusiastic beginners, we discussed how these folks are living in their expectations and have yet to experience disappointment. Well, when reality does set in, usually somewhere between a couple of weeks to a month after starting their term, it can be hard to swallow. Members get that first check, and despite being told 1,000 times, are still shocked at how small the amount is. The fantasy about the house and the friends and the food is manifested as a small apartment with strange roommates and lonely Friday nights. Instead of wowing you with their incredible skills, your Vista is sitting in a crowded space with a 10-year-old computer updating a manual they have absolutely no context for. It's rough, and I always tell members that if they didn't seriously consider quitting at least once during this time, that would be weird. It's a hard reality to face, and it's natural to second-guess your decision. It's easy to look at the circumstances you left or opportunities you turned down with rose-colored glasses, believing that you made a mistake in choosing the course that you did. What's more, as humans, we never hold the awareness to say, gee, I really built this up, and it appears that right now I'm experiencing unavoidable disappointment because reality never could have been as good as what I imagined. No. Instead of taking accountability for our perceptions, we blame others. And more often than not, your member's going to blame you and your organization for how they're feeling. I call these false causes. Instead of being upset about homelessness, I'm now upset that my boss isn't giving me Friday off. Instead of being angry about the state of veterans in our country, I'm going to be angry about this specific office policy. Instead of being upset about food insecurity, I'm now going to be mad at AmeriCorps for the shirt that they make me wear. They do it, we do it, everyone does it. It's part of the process. So how do you help your member through this disillusioned phase? The first step in supporting your disillusioned learner is to empathize and demonstrate care. Transitioning is hard. Adulting is hard. Vista is hard. Your member won't be in this messy emotional space forever, so be gentle with them as they figure it out. Small tokens of affection can go miles for your member during this phase. Stock up on things like thank you cards and gift certificates now rather than waiting until you see signs of distress. This will show your member that you took the initiative to show them that they matter not only to you, but to the organization. It might also be helpful for you to share stories about the times you struggled during a transition. Think back on your own experiences, being young and making ends meet. What did you learn? What experience can you share? Sometimes the best thing you can do is explain that you've been there and made it through. And it's worth mentioning that these stories are often better told while walking and breathing in some fresh air. Your story and the change of scenery will absolutely make a difference to your member. Next, you'll need to put a lot of intention into keeping your member productive as they work through their emotions. You'll be well served to revisit the member's data and create small, tangible, achievable goals so that your member can see the results of their work and experience the motivation that comes from a quick win. For example, rather than say, hey, here's the Facebook password, see what you think, try saying, oh, your first step is to find 10 other similar organizations with Facebook pages and make note of what you like and what's different. Once that's been done, then ask them to research social media campaigns that can be used to increase page likes. Break it down into small steps and give them the next step only after the first one's been completed. Finally, when you sense that your member is attaching to a false cause, do not be passive. Name it, discuss it, address it. If you ignore those beliefs, they're going to fester and build and have the potential to derail an entire term. If you're keeping with your regular, predictable check-ins, you'll see the false causes emerging and have a chance to address them before they turn into real problems, so keep those check-ins up. And while you're checking in, remember that your member is still developing competency, so it's important to maintain a directive, training-oriented approach to their work. We've got another guest speaker on deck, but before we hear from him, I want to highlight that your resource sheet has some great tools for coaching against resistance, revisiting the VADs, stress survival guides, etc. If you have questions about anything we've covered thus far, there's a really good chance that you're going to find some answers there. All right, our next guest speaker, Eric Powell, is going to step up and share more about his experience as a disillusioned learner. Eric, take it away.
Thank you, Shannon. As mentioned earlier, I was a VISTA leader, but before that, I served as a VISTA member in the smallest state with the biggest heart, which we all know is the lovely state of Rhode Island. As mentioned, I served with Rhode Island Campus Compact at Roger Williams University, which basically focused on increasing civic engagement, service learning, and impacting the surrounding communities. Part of my role was working with 70 community partners in soliciting feedback and scheduling meetings, as well as working on projects that would ultimately get students more involved in anti-poverty issues in the community. But in thinking about it, I really felt that my VISTA year started very, very differently than most other VISTA members. Instead of being enthusiastic at the start and really excited about the first few weeks of my service, I actually began my service as a serious, disillusioned learner. I did not start off in a happy mood and certainly was not excited about my service. The tasks I was assigned were not what I thought I would be doing because I wasn't glad about my VAD, and I immediately realized that I was doing two things that I really didn't want to do at the time. One was doing research, which to me at the time was unexciting, and the second was being stuck in an office. I really wanted to be out in the community, building relationships and partnerships. I became disillusioned because I did not see how this VISTA position would motivate me, really help others, and in a selfish way, I didn't see how it would help me to be a better, more knowledgeable person. My supervisor did not know this because I did not tell her at the beginning. I didn't really want to say anything at first. I mean, why would I? I just wanted to wait it out and see if the problem got better. Was it my fault for not paying attention to the VAD, or was it someone else's fault for not educating me on my position? In the midst of the frustration was eating me from the inside, and I really just wanted the situation resolved as soon as possible. I figured, why bring up a sore subject if it's something that I have to deal with on my own and shouldn't bother anyone else with? I couldn't tell if my supervisor had any inclination of my sentiments based on my lack of energy, fewer comments, and my trying harder to understand what I was doing. Why would I start a possibly controversial conversation with my supervisor when all it would do was make her angry and make me even more angry? I might as well just stay silent. But I was really good at hiding my sentiments, and some people are really good at not speaking about their mind, because I was thinking, it's all good, or just give it some time and it'll be fine. However, deep inside, I was seriously thinking about quitting, actually every single day. I was very upset, mostly with myself for not having known what I was getting myself into. I did find solace in commiserating with another VISTA at the same project at a different site. She and I were both having some serious difficulties and complaining and talking about our frustrations and how much we wanted to quit. After about 2 months, she decided to quit. It really bothered me, but I thought, maybe this is a sign that I should quit too. Just get up and run. Time to leave, no harm, no foul. But when I really wanted to quit and think about it, I knew that I was not a quitter, and I knew that the VISTA program and my supervisor were depending on me for a full year of service. I literally told myself that I needed to either shape up or ship out. After thinking about it some more, I decided that I committed to a year of service, so shipping out was not an option. I had to make this work for the organization and for myself, and it was time to shape up. So I finally told my supervisor that I wanted to have a meeting with her, and I sat down and talked with her about it. When I did get a chance to speak to her, I calmly told her that I really wanted to succeed and serve with all of my heart, but that I was really not having fun with my service. I told her that I am, and I've always been, someone involved in direct service, such as serving meals at soup kitchens or helping to volunteer on a construction site. But I hadn't really realized what capacity building role was all about. I told her the truth, which was that it was very difficult for me to be in an office at a computer all day when I just want to break free and serve. So I mentioned that part of the issue was probably the fact that I needed to do a better job of understanding my role, and that I was also hoping to incorporate different projects into the VAD, such as communicating with community partners and meeting with students about their projects as they related to their role in anti-poverty efforts. What truly solidified my success and finishing out my year of service was the fact that my supervisor actually listened to my concerns. She did not say that she was too busy to meet. She did not say that I needed to stop complaining and just do the work. She really showed genuine concern and wanted to know how she could help. She asked me what was wrong and also asked me what suggestions I had to improve it. She took the time to really try to understand my sentiments and help me do better. She was able to make some adjustments to my VAD so that I could still accomplish the work that she set out for me, but also factor in some of my interests around the service. Whether or not capacity building work was my calling, I learned to at least understand service from a different perspective. And even though I still engaged in direct service activities on the weekends, on my own time of course, I became more and more excited about fully understanding the ins and outs of service, what capacity building really means, and what it takes to do good quality service. It was truly an eye-opening experience for me to start out as a disillusioned learner and move forward to a successful year of service. And I'm forever grateful for what my supervisor did to not only help me accomplish her goals in the VAD, but also to help me grow personally and professionally. Even though much of my initial struggles were admittedly because of my own faults, I likely would have not thrived as easily or as well if I had not had the supervisor that I did with her person-to-person approach. So in thinking about that, there are some tips about how VISTA members have a better understanding of their VISTA assignment description and their roles in service. They may still be enjoying their service, and they may also have more questions. This is a great time in the VISTA members' year where challenges can set in with their progress, with their living situation and expenses, and with what they will do after their year of service. Some ways that you can help your VISTA member include personal but not too personal. You really want to get to know your VISTA, and your VISTA wants to get to know you. But don't get too close in terms of discussions of personal lives, but do share stories and situations with your VISTA member that they can relate to. Help your VISTA member recognize that you are a real person, and hopefully a fun one, and not a boring supervisor who has no time for them. Celebrate birthdays and achievements, find out what interests your VISTA member, and connect them to other people in the organization who may be similar or have similar tasks. Take a vested interest in helping your VISTA learn more about who he or she is and her goals in life. Second, invitations to events. Undoubtedly, there are events that are happening at work or in other places, and in sharing experiences, be sure to invite your VISTA member to those functions and events. If you know of festivals, community events, and activities happening in the area, encourage your VISTA to either join you and a group of people, or at least periodically let your VISTA member know about the activities. They may be new to the area or they may be familiar with it, but it really helps to foster a feeling of commitment and community with the VISTA. You don't have to spend hours and hours working on this, but small steps are still progress and can help the VISTA become more acclimated to his or her surroundings and really feel welcomed. And finally, accolades and positive vibes. Make a plan to talk about the VISTA member's great work to your supervisor, to other colleagues, to community partners, and more. Give the VISTA member credit when it is due. Consider periodically putting a positive quote or inspirational saying on the VISTA member's keyboard as they come in the morning, or perhaps you make a poster of positivity in the VISTA member's office area, and you post pictures, comments, phrases, and more based on the great work the VISTA is doing. If you're not invested in the VISTA member will not be invested in you, and that is not a good situation. Certainly not every single situation is going to be positive, and it is important for you to address those situations and help the VISTA member improve. Nevertheless, a happy VISTA member who is truly thriving will make you want to consider how you want to thrive.
Awesome. Eric, thank you so much for giving us your account and sharing your experience with us. All right, so we've covered the enthusiastic beginner and the disillusioned learner. These levels might sound awful, but in reality, they're often subtle, so please don't get the idea that your member will continually be in emotional crisis. That's not the case. All right, so the next level is known as the reluctant contributor, and this level will probably be recognizable to all of you. Exactly when your member will enter this stage is highly dependent upon how well the disillusion phase was navigated, but you can anticipate this occurring a few months into their turn. The shift from disillusionment into reluctant contributing essentially indicates that an individual has resolved their emotional discomfort and has made a conscious decision to follow through with a commitment, which is exactly what we just heard from Eric. Think about that. When you've made those shifts, it's usually a reflection of having made it to a point where your competency has now increased. You've come to grips with the decision you made, with the reality of your circumstances, and you're ready to get the work done. The downside of this phase is that you neglect to take your emotional transition into consideration when looking over your workload and accomplishments, and suddenly feel as if you've done nothing, have been given no responsibility, and are underutilized. People generally act to that in one of two ways. First, they may simply lose motivation. They think, if you're not going to make use of me, I'm not going to try and convince you. Or on the other hand, they might start to really push their boundaries, take risks, and take on too much in an attempt to demonstrate their abilities. They seem like really different and opposite behaviors. However, they often indicate the same thing, which is that your member's ready for responsibility. So how do we approach our members during this stage to increase their commitment and move towards thriving? The first step in building commitment in your member is to refocus them on their overall performance and goals. Yes, you reviewed this when they began, but they had so much going on, it'll need to be covered again. And remember, during the disillusionment phase, you kept them focused on small, tangible goals, so more than likely they're not thinking long term. Now's the time to repaint the big picture by returning to the overall project goal on the VAD and completing a formal midterm evaluation. You'll want to check with your project intermediaries to see if they have an evaluation protocol, but even if they don't, you should still do one. The evaluation is your opportunity to reinforce what your member's doing well and let them know where they need to improve. Now that their emotional transition's complete, there's a good chance they can hear that feedback and actually put it into action. The evaluation process should also include the revision of the project goal. In doing this, allow your member to share their impressions of your organization, your programs, and their tasks. Remember, they just completed their community entry and probably have important observations to share and include. Allow your member to draft their goals in their own language as a strategy to express their growing competency as well as developing commitment and buy-in. Finally, it's time to really engage them in problem solving and decision making and do so in a way that will allow you to commit to putting their input into play. We're going to go ahead and bring Colleen back to provide you with a model of proactive supervision you can use to begin strategizing ways to give your reluctant contributor a clear path to increased responsibility.
Thanks, Shannon. So as I mentioned earlier, my service as a VISTA member had some rough patches. But in my VISTA leader year, I had a very different experience with my supervisor. My supervisor scheduled regular weekly check-ins with a set agenda. And I can remember becoming a reluctant contributor as my supervisor introduced me to MOCA, which is a tool she found in Managing to Change the World, a nonprofit manager's guide to getting results. This tool allowed me to learn how to be a proactive communicator. MOCA, which is an acronym for Manager, Owner, Consulted, Helper, and Approver, assisted me in figuring out who was who in a project and further to communicate these roles with others when I owned a project. I was able to put MOCA into practice shortly after being introduced to it. My co-leader, Chelsea, and I were tasked with organizing an event for AmeriCorps Week, which included our VISTA cohort of 41 members and approximately 160 other National Service members in the city of Buffalo. As the organizers, Chelsea and I were the owners and assigned other agency staff to their relevant roles. With MOCA, I felt refocused in my work and more confident in my abilities to be proactive and productive. Supervising a reluctant contributor is all about building confidence and empowering a member. By utilizing MOCA, a supervisor can step back and allow VISTAs to own projects or tasks, as well as to identify the other players in a project. This will provide structure and allow the members and supervisors to be proactive communicators. Don't forget to check in with your member during this stage. Shannon, back to you.
Awesome, Colleen. Thank you so very much. All right. So we've gone through it and we've made it. We've got our peak performers and they're thriving. Well, it's not always linear or as clear-cut as we've lined out here. If you're willing to rely on the model and really think about the emotional components of your member's development, there's a good chance you'll get here. The problem is, just when your member gets it all figured out and they're performing and doing everything you've always wished and hoped when you signed up to this program to see happen, they're going to realize that the end of their term isn't that far off and they need to start thinking about next steps. Unfortunately, this could hit them only halfway through their term, and that makes sense because we know that the majority of folks who enroll in these positions are young college graduates and that they don't have a bunch of opportunities available. This is certainly going to be a distraction, but that's okay. You can support them in figuring it out while also ensuring they stay present to their commitments to you in the program. All right, so now what do we need to do? What are our tips for ensuring that our peak performers rock and roll to a strong finish? First, protect your member and don't allow other people in the organization to pull them into different tasks or away from their VAD. It's easy to want to pile work onto an individual who's performing at a high level, but overloading is a recipe for burnout and it can throw the entire thriving thing off. Remember, these folks are new professionals and they don't know they're overcommitted until it's happened, so it's going to be your responsibility to help pace them when necessary. On the flip side, you also don't want to bore them to tears, so you want to make sure to keep it interesting and challenging. Find out if they've got skills or goals they want to address before they leave and see if you can work it in. Now, to be clear, the VAD is their work plan, and if you want to add or change an activity, you've got to run that through the correct channels. But it's okay to change individual tasks and goals as long as they align with the overall project. Next, instead of pretending you didn't find a copy of their resume on the printer, ask them how their future planning is going and what they're hoping to do. Create some space and time to support them in their future planning. Maybe you review their resume, review their school application, all of those types of things. Send them to job fairs, giving them opportunity to really think through. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, gosh, I need them here working, but the reality is they're going to work on their transitional planning regardless of you giving them permission to or not. So you're better served to create space for that to happen and know that you're going to be getting their best performance when they are present. This is also where you might want to draft a letter of recommendation for your person. I can't tell you how often I'm asked to do those last minute or years down the road, so something to think about. And finally, you want to make a big stink about your member graduating. I've seen how much it means to people over the years, and I've seen how much it hurts when a site doesn't plan anything. I talked about the importance of national service when we opened this webinar up and how we all are going to benefit from the skills and values these folks develop during their term, so giving them a nice send-off is a big way to do that. So as we wrap up, let's go ahead and tap back into the knowledge out there across America and get creative. We're going to go straight to our number one tips and see what we've got from each of us. We've got Eric and Colleen, so we'll wrap up with our tips and then see what questions you have. For me personally, my number one tip in terms of a thriving member is to maintain those check-ins, which is something I've hit on quite a bit. But again, we've talked about if you are, dependable and predictable with your check-ins, you're going to create an opportunity to be listening and hearing about your Vista members' experience and deal with things proactively versus reactively. So that would be my number one tip. Let's go ahead and hear from Eric next.
Thank you. My number one tip is literally just ask your member what makes you thrive. I know it's a simple question, but if you find out what motivates them, what their passion is, you can find a fairly easy way to somehow connect their passions, their motivations, and what makes them thrive, connect it with their VAD so that they're really making themselves happy, they're also making you happy, and the community happy by solving all three at once. Simple, easy. Well, it's not always easy, but it's I found it to be one of the most effective things to do.
Great. So this is Colleen. I'll go next. I would say my number one tip is to assign the work and be very specific about that assignment and proactively check in. Jessica?
Thank you. So my number one tip is really, it's been said, it's just really understand all the nuances that go along with Vista and be available to your Vistas. One thing that came in when you guys did the registration and you asked questions, you said, what do I hope to get out of this and to better understand? I thought one person here, if you're on this webinar, I think this is brilliant. You said, keeping in mind or remembering what it's like to be young, broke, in a new city, far from family, and a first professional job experience, and trying to live up to a boss's high expectations. So I think thinking it from the lens of a Vista, I think that's a great tip. So whoever wrote this is wonderful. And I think that concludes us for today. A big thank you to Shannon and Eric and Colleen. You guys have had a wealth of knowledge and wealth of experience as Vistas, and I know every supervisor here is very thankful for that. We do want you to take a quick evaluation for us before we get to the Q&A. We like to know what you think, what you liked, what you want to hear more about. I know you're going to say that we're all fabulous and, best webinar ever, but we also want to know if there's things that you hope to learn in the future so that we can make these webinars. These are for you, so we want to know what you want to know. So take a few moments to go ahead and do that evaluation, and we'll get to the Q&A. I am going to invite our operator to let us know how to ask a question over the phone. Operator, are you there?
Thank you. Participants on the phone, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name. Please make sure your line is unmuted and record your name with the prompt. To withdraw your request, please press *2. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name. One moment for incoming questions.
Thank you so much. So we'll get to the, while we wait for questions to come in over the phone, we'll go ahead to the Q&A. This is in the chat, but I'm going to answer it anyway. It says, is this slide presentation available to print? So Shirley, we will have this available on the Vista Campus Vista Supervisors page in about a week from now, and you'll be able to print this presentation from there. It usually doesn't take a full week, but you will get an email once it is posted, so just keep an eye out for it. It doesn't look like there's any other questions here. Remember, you can type your question in the Q&A panel. I do realize that we are 1 minute from the top of the hour, so I want to be respectful of everyone's time. We will, say a couple more minutes if there are questions, and we'll answer all the questions that come in. But we do understand that you guys are busy supervisors, so we do want to just say right now, thank you for joining us if you can't stay. We appreciate it, and we hope to see you on our future webinars. So we did get another question here. Sarah here said that my Vista said he wants to work for our organization after his year of service is complete. We'd love to offer him a job, but not sure if we can afford it. How do I have that conversation with him? So Shannon, I'm going to turn it over to you. Do you have any suggestions here for Sarah?
Oh, you bet. This is a pretty common thing. So my advice, Sarah, would be just to have that conversation directly with him and say, you're performing well. We think you're a resource. We think you're an asset. But, at this point, we're not sure. We're going to keep trying different strategies and see what we come up with. And if we can make it work, great. But make sure you're looking at other options, too, because you'd hate to see him hung out on a limb because you couldn't pull it off. I've definitely gone through that with members, and they tend to just take that direct response for what it is. So that would be my suggestion.
And to piggyback off that, we also have, it's also a moment to pivot towards, we have an initiative called the Employers of National Service. So it's employers who, like it says, employ people who have served in national service. So it's employers who see the benefits that national service brings, and those candidates who have participated in national service, what they bring to the job. So definitely point them in that direction, like, hey, while we might not be able to hire you, there are tons of organizations all across the country that really value the work that you do as a Vista and really want to hire Vistas. So, so that's another great way, too, to pivot off that conversation. So I'm going to turn to the operator real quick. Operator, do we have any questions over the phone?
I have one question. One moment while I grab the name. Excuse me, sorry, ma'am, your line is now open.
Hi there. Are you there?
Again, caller, please unmute your line. You have the floor.
Hello?
Hi there.
Oh, great. Hi, my name's Sally. I'm a supervisor in Austin, and we're looking to recruit Vista leaders for next year, but we're kind of starting that process early, so our Vistas are only about 6 months into their service. At what point do people typically start having conversations about potentially asking one of them to stay on as a Vista leader?
That's a great question. Colleen, our New Jersey program officer, I'm going to turn that over to you.
Thanks. So I would say as early as possible. You could definitely put the bug in their ear. I would be careful as to just talking to one person about it as opposed to just kind of putting it out there and then maybe having more specific conversations with people that you're interested in, but to make it fair to put that out to everyone. And I remember when I was a Vista member, someone asked me if I would be interested about 2 months into my service, and I said absolutely not. And then came around, and by I think the 7th or 8th month was when they opened up the application process and applied, and I changed my mind. So you don't want to have a member end early to be a leader, but definitely opening that up as soon as 6 months is a good idea.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have another question here. We have an older Vista who has extensive work experience. Any suggestions on how to keep her feeling satisfied? she's having difficulty staying within the scope of her project because she sees other organizational needs. Shannon, any thoughts?
Oh, you bet. Love the non-traditional vistas first and foremost. Those folks have been bright lights in my career, but definitely familiar with the challenges that you're facing. So I would encourage you to really do a little bit of work and look at generational differences. Motivating sideboarding folks from different generations really is an art form, and so there's just a different strategy that you can take with folks who are coming in with that level of experience and, frankly, a different belief system around work and productivity. As far as kind of going outside of their lane and trying to take on things that, you know, are outside of their VAD, again, I am a big believer of being very direct with people. I think we waste a lot of time trying to kind of subtly give somebody an idea that they're not doing what we'd like. So this is where your check-ins come into play. This is where monitoring their work plan and being very clear and detailed and providing those mini goals to make sure that this person's staying on track. And if they continue to go off, you know, offline and working on things, you may just have to have a more kind of broader conversation around, you know, the role of VISTA, the role of AmeriCorps, and you appreciate their insight, but you hired this position for a specific need and you need them to stay on track.
Thank you, Shannon. So another question here for you, Shannon. I'm lobbing them at you. We said a question here is, how do you know when it is really best that a VISTA member quit rather than coaching them through that disillusionment stage?
Oh, my gosh. I know. That's like one of those things where the answer is going to be the old frustrating. It's all very situational. You know, for me, I guess where I would go with that question is first and foremost to check in with yourself. And figure out what you might be bringing to the table. So if you're working with a VISTA and you're not getting that performance and you're really thinking that cutting ties with them is going to be the best course of action, I strongly encourage you to look at yourself and sort of what are you bringing to the table? What are you making their behavior mean? What's the emotional energy that you're bringing to the situation that might have you leaning that direction first and foremost? Then I think the other thing, and I've done this with some VISTAs in the past, where I was really struggling to move them outside of that disillusioned learner phase. And you know, I went as far as to say, well, you know, it just really sounds like you want to quit. Sounds good. Here's a calendar. Tell me what day. And when you make it that bold for people, sometimes they will take a step back and go, wow, okay, I'm actually going to have to make a hard decision here around whether or not I'm going to stay or cut bait. So I think that's kind of, that's another strategy. The other piece I always think about, too, is recognizing when one individual's issues are causing too much of a disruption for the entire team. So that's another piece that I would take into consideration when trying to decide if the one-person storm needed just to be exited. Is this really causing a disruption to the entire team and affecting productivity across the board? So summary, what are you bringing to the table? Next, give them the option and see if they take it. And then finally, be thinking about how it's disrupting the team and the workflow as whether or not you need to push the issue.
Thank you, Shannon. That's always a difficult one. So I want to go back to our operator. Do we have any questions over the phone?
At this moment, I'm showing no questions in queue, but as a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press *1 and record your name.
Thank you so much. So, Eric, I'm going to lob this one to you. What method of communication do you encourage for the VISTAs, oral or written? Which is better?
So first, I would actually recommend, sorry, I can't talk very well today, that you actually ask your VISTA what they prefer. I'm not saying you should go with that 100%, but if someone says they're more of an oral communicator, my best practice has always been, it's good to actually have a conversation with someone, even if it's a short one or a long one, because it encourages community and it also helps them practice and you practice public speaking, but then follow up with an email. A lot of my work as a VISTA leader and now has been emails, which can be effective, but I realize I need to also add in the oral component. So my recommendation would be to do both, but if you have to do one or the other, I think oral sometimes can be a little bit stronger because at least that way they can tell the tone in your voice. You can make it sound a little bit more positive and it conveys the real meaning behind the message as opposed to just reading an email and saying, I'm not sure what they meant by that. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you so much, Eric. So a question here from Barbara. She asks, are Vista volunteers eligible to apply to your organization for the next term? For example, they have completed their year and want to stay for the next year. Is that allowed? So, Barbara, quick answer is yes. Yes, there's no restriction, there's no policy restriction that says that a Vista cannot serve another term at your organization. It does matter based on if you have space at Vista, if you can recruit someone for a position for the next year, if you will still have that Vista position. So that is something that you'll want to talk to your state office program officer about before making like any guarantees or anything like that to a Vista. But yeah, there's no prohibition based on that. All right, Shannon, I'm getting another disillusioned question for you. How would you tackle a disillusioned Vista who has expressed that they cannot relate to the people we serve and is struggling doing the work because they don't get it?
Oh, man, that is an interesting one. So, again, the theme here is I'm a fairly direct individual, and that's how I tend to inform my supervision practice. The question I'm asking is, you don't need to get it in order to do the work, right? I spent a bunch of time in the last several years working on different veterans initiatives and tribal initiatives here in Montana, and at the end of the day, I will never fully understand what it is to be a veteran, nor will I understand what it is to be a tribal member here in Montana. I don't need to know. I don't need to get it for those people in order to understand the importance of the work, the importance of doing capacity building and infrastructure development, which is what Vistas are charged to do. Without knowing more about it, I'm going to go ahead and fall back and say that's probably a false cause. This is where somebody is creating a barrier for themselves to avoid doing the work. So if I was that person's supervisor, I would challenge them a little bit and have them clearly articulate to me why them not being able to fully understand the position of the people they're serving is a barrier for them to get the work done, and listen to those specific, answers and coach them out of it. So that would be my response to that.
Thank you, Shannon. I love it, Shannon. I just love you're right to the point. It's wonderful. Love it. So, operator, do you have any questions over the phone?
There are no questions in the queue.
Fantastic. So, I think we've got to all the questions here. Don't worry. If you still have questions, if you leave this webinar and you're like, man, I really wish I would have asked this, you can always contact us. We are, on our next slide here, we're going to show you our webinar address. VistaWebinars@cns.gov is where you can get a hold of us if you have any questions about what we've spoken about here today. And we sure hope that you're going to join us in the new year, in the wonderful year of 2017. Our next webinar is Designing a Successful On-Site Orientation and Training. So please join us for that. It'll be on January 17th, and we can't wait to see you. Have a great holiday season. Enjoy your new year. And once again, thank you all for joining, and thank you to our speakers today. Everyone, have a great day.
Thanks.